Now, detonate the reality bomb!
I will build a great, great wall.
Some alien race to come down and threaten us.
Is the singularity near?
The truth is out there.
The military-industrial complex.
The 7 mountains of the influencers of culture.
To be as gods, you know.
Change has come to America.
Catapult of propaganda.
From a secure location on top of the ridge in the heart of the beautiful Missouri Ozarks, this is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
The coyotes are howling outside on the ridge. That means it's time to go live. This is A View from the Bunker. This week, turning paradise into hell. How you can help the Marzullis. Are you ready for Hillary 4.0? Israel sends commandos into Gaza and takes out a Hamas leader. And the election in Jerusalem for the new mayor could bring the third temple. And you knew this was going to happen. The creepy porn lawyer just won't go away. Plus, a new era of paganism coming right through the front doors of the church in America. Our special guests, Josh Peck and Steven Bancarz, authors of The Second Coming of the New Age, join us at the bottom of the hour. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker for November 11th, 2018. Thanks for joining us tonight. If you're listening live at Spreaker.com or wherever fine podcasts are sold. If you're listening to this in the archives, we appreciate you letting us inside your ear holes. Do take advantage of the free mobile app. That's probably the easiest way to get this program, and make sure that you don't miss a single one. Bypasses all of the other stuff. You don't have to remember a URL or anything. The app is free. It's good for the for Android phones and tablets, and of course the iPhone, iPad, and iPod Touch. Links at vftb.net, which is the official website. The URL there, what we call your basic acronym. View from the Bunker, vftb.net. Our YouTube channel is youtube.com/Derek Gilbert, and you'll find us on social media, facebook.com, View from the Bunker. And our Twitter feed, our Tweety feed is View from Bunker, because they didn't have enough letters for the full name. So what is going on tonight? Well, of course, the big story across America is the deadly fires taking place in California. The death toll at 25 as of this Sunday evening, 23 in the deadly Camp Fire. This is in Northern California, where it broke out near Chico just a couple of days ago. And this is the thing that's really remarkable about this fire, and not remarkable in a good way, that it blew up so quickly. Things have been so dry in California, and with winds coming in off the ocean, the fire jumped out of nowhere, it seems, and within a day, practically, it has destroyed the Northern California town of Paradise. More than 6,700 structures destroyed just one day after the fire began. And according to authorities, as we record this, about 110 people still missing. 25 dead altogether, but 110 remain missing, according to authorities at this hour. This is incredible. This has already become the largest fire in California history, the third deadliest in California history, and it's not... the firefighters aren't getting any breaks on this. A red flag warning still in effect for Northern California this Sunday. Southern California enduring a similar disaster as fires have broken out near California in western Los Angeles County and nearby Ventura County. Those are the Hill and Woolsey fires. And we've got some information on the Woolsey fire that we'll share in just a minute. Up front here, I need to make one program announcement just in case we need to break unexpectedly. The one thing that's different about broadcasting from a home studio that I never had to contend with during my years in broadcasting, which began, as Josh Peck likes to remind me, several years before he was born, was dealing with the pet dachshund. And I thought we were going to be late tonight because about 3 minutes to 7 Central Time, Sam decided he needed to go outside right then. And dachshunds can be very insistent. They don't always say much, but that stare, those beady, black, staring eyes. So he's having a little bit of a tummy upset. He was eating grass out there just before broadcast tonight. So if he comes in and looks like he's about to have an accident, we may have to cut to a break here unexpectedly, just giving you a heads up. So anyway, National Weather Service not projecting good news for California. More high winds, sustained winds of up to 40 miles an hour earlier today, and gusts up to 60 and 70 miles an hour. When you've got fire and dry conditions, that is a deadly combination. And sadly, there are reports of people who were overcome by smoke and then fire in their cars as they were trying to get away. They waited just a few minutes too long. So if you're in the path of this, anywhere near it, listen to the local authorities, get out of the danger zone as quickly as you possibly can, because this is just an unbelievable disaster. The pictures coming out of Paradise, California, in that area, you hate to use the word irony, but to have a town of 27,000 people named Paradise to yield such images that look like they come right from the gates of hell is just unbelievable. The entire town gone. Chairman of the California Fire Foundation, Brian Rice, told NBC News, it looks like Armageddon. And sadly, this is the kind of thing that will probably continue in California, not necessarily because of any mismanagement on the part of government or what have you. I think the bottom line is what's driving this more than anything else, and the fact that they're becoming more and more destructive, is the population of California has exploded over the last 50, 60 years. There's something like 4 times more people in California now than there were in 1950. And so what would have been back in the day a relatively harmless brush fire in a semi-arid desert that would recover from it now is burning across areas that are heavily populated. And so it's turning into a tragedy. And one of the, personal friends that we have who's been affected by this, you probably have heard. If you're listening to this program, you probably already know this, but we'll pass this along just in case you haven't. The fire, the Woolsey fire, which is affecting West Los Angeles County, is threatened the city of Malibu, and about 177 homes in that area have been destroyed, one of which belonged to L.A. and Peggy Marzulli. So the Marzullis, who lived in that area a long, long time, before the property values in California got crazy. So it's not like they're living in Malibu because they're living high on the hog. It's just they bought in early. I've got cousins out in California who have homes worth nearly $500,000, but 1,400 square feet, 1-car garage and no basement. The kind of place that here in the Ozarks would sell for $85,000 maybe. But they bought back in the 50s and early 60s before things went crazy over there as far as real estate values. So anyway, the home, L.A. and Peggy's home, complete loss. The guest house that they built themselves, complete loss. Everything that they weren't able to put into the fireproof fruit cellar is gone. And that includes a lot of books, DVDs, and equipment. So they're going to need to rebuild. And they're going to need living expenses until insurance is settled. And that's probably going to take a while, given the conditions that insurance adjusters are going to have to deal with out there. So if you feel led to help, this is an opportunity for you to be a blessing to L.A. and Peggy Marzulli. Thankfully, they were in Dallas. They're okay. Their daughters are okay. Their pets are okay. But most everything that was in the house just absolutely destroyed. LA's website has links to a GoFundMe campaign and to a PayPal donation site where you can donate if you've got a PayPal account. If you prefer to go use a credit card and go through GoFundMe, you can do that. The links are at his website. That's lamarzulli.wordpress.com. lamarzulli.wordpress.com. Again, this is an opportunity to take some direct action and help somebody who has been such a blessing to many of us. So, and pray for them and pray for everyone else who's still out in the in the path of these fires, because unless there's been some news here that I'm not aware of in the last hour or so, I've not seen any good news as far as a break in the weather that would help firefighters get a better handle on this. As of about an hour or so ago, the information I've got is that the Woolsey fire in Malibu is only about 10% contained. I don't know what the level of containment is on the campfire in Northern California, but it's got a ways to go before this is over. Other things happening in the news this Sunday evening. Wall Street Journal has published an op-ed piece that suggests Hillary Clinton may, in fact, run again in 2020. This might be what you call a soft launch. This is published by the Wall Street Journal this Sunday evening, just before broadcast, in fact. Two close allies of Bill and Hillary Clinton made a case for Hillary to give it one more shot. Mark Penn, who was a pollster and a senior advisor to Bill and Hillary Clinton, and Bill Stein, a former Democratic Manhattan Borough president and currently president of the New York City Council, probably closer to Bill and Hillary than a lot of the pundits out there for the Talking Heads networks. They wrote in this piece, quote, "Don't pay much attention to the I won't run declarations. Hillary knows both Mr. Clinton and Mr. Obama declared they weren't running until they ran. She may even skip Iowa and enter the race later, but rest assured that one way or another, Hillary 4.0 is on the way." Well, if Donald Trump ever needed any good news, I guess that would qualify. Now, I don't. Let me qualify that by saying this. I think one of the reasons that Donald Trump won in 2016, above and beyond the obvious, I mean, if you're listening to this program, you probably shared, as I did, a real dissatisfaction, a disgust even, with business as usual in Washington, D.C. It's professional wrestling in suits. The two sides put on a good show of fighting one another in front of the cameras, and behind the scenes, they're laughing, joking, and going out for drinks. And Donald Trump was, we had no idea what to expect. I mean, I love the way Josh Peck put it. He said, we don't know if he's going to be a good president, but at least if he wins, it'll be hilarious. It has been entertaining. The hilarity is in watching the deep state expose itself because they are so flabbergasted that this outsider was actually able to pull this off. And I think part of the reason he was able to do it was that Hillary didn't take him seriously. I mean, you look at the campaign that she ran and some of the states that she didn't campaign in until it was too late, which were key to Donald Trump's victory. So if she runs again in 2020, she's probably not going to make those mistakes again. Now, she may be goods that are too damaged to win. That would be my gut instinct. But then my gut instinct when Mr. Trump declared for presidency, for the presidency, was that it was a joke. So what do I know? I know a lot of Democrats are not thrilled at the idea of Hillary running again. But who else have they got on the bench? Cory Booker? Kamala Harris? Elizabeth Warren might have sealed her fate by going public 2 weeks before the midterms with her DNA proof of being 1,024th something. If you really read the DNA report, by the way, that Senator Warren put out there, read it carefully, you would know that she didn't actually prove even North American ancestry. As I understand it, Native American tribes here don't encourage their members to participate in DNA database studies. So that one ancestor of Senator Warren's might actually have been Peruvian or Colombian. So we don't even know it was Native American. So anyway, that didn't exactly do what she had hoped it would do. And so that may have finished her off. But anyway, so who else have the Democrats got? Bernie Sanders again? And isn't it interesting that this party of inclusion still seems to want to run out old white people. So we will see. I just thought that was interesting that a couple people close to the Clinton campaign, or to Bill and Hillary, let me put it that way, may be signaling that there will be a Clinton campaign in 2020. From Israel, some breaking news this Sunday night. Special forces raided deep into Gaza and killed the top commander of Hamas. Palestinian medical sources confirming at least 6 people killed in a raid that reached about 3 kilometers, that's roughly 2 miles, deep into Palestinian territory inside the Gaza Strip. The IDF say, well, the IDF usually doesn't confirm this. Palestinian officials confirmed that an Israeli special forces raid on a group of Hamas commanders in the city of Khan Yunis did take place, and a senior commander in the military wing of Hamas was one of the victims. Hamas acknowledging that a top Qassam Brigade's commander, Noor Baraka, was killed by Israeli special forces who entered the area, they say, driving a civilian vehicle. So the special forces team managed to exfiltrate Gaza apparently without incident. Israeli aircraft laid down some covering fire, this according to the Times of Israel. And communities around southern Israel saw multiple rockets fired out of Gaza. One hit an open field, and a couple of others apparently intercepted by the Iron Dome anti-missile shield. So some excitement around southern Israel tonight. We'll talk about our upcoming Israel tour in next May 2019. We're about halfway between this year's tour and next year's tour, so we'll give you details on how you can participate if you're interested. And I will say this: things were blowing up along the Gaza Strip while we were there in May, and we didn't really get a sense that we were being affected by it in any way whatsoever, even though from Jerusalem, the Gaza border crossing is maybe 50, 60 miles. So I think if something were happening 60 miles from us here in the United States, we'd be a little more concerned than most Israelis are about that sort of thing. It's a matter of scale. I mean, for us, especially if you grow up here in the Midwest, you get used to long distances between places, especially major cities. If you want to go to Tulsa, it's a couple hours. Kansas City, 3.5. St. Louis, 4.5. You got to go a ways. But in 4.5 hours, you can drive from Dan to Beersheba in Israel. So a little bit different sense of scale, and it's all in what you're used to. But the IDF generally has a handle on this sort of thing. Speaking of Israel, this I thought was interesting. Runoff election for the mayor of Jerusalem coming up this Tuesday. Their initial election a week before last had 5 candidates in it. The top 2 candidates, neither one, or nobody, I should say, in the election crossed the 40% threshold, which is required under Israeli law to for somebody to declare victory. So the 2 candidates, and I'm probably going to mangle their names, so I ask your forgiveness up front, Ofer Berkovich and Moshe Leon. Those are the 2 men left standing. Leon got about 33% of the vote, and Berkovich came in second with 29% of the vote. So there's a runoff scheduled for Tuesday. But the reason this is interesting is that the reconstituted Sanhedrin has sent a letter to the 2 candidates emphasizing the role of the Third Temple in municipal policy in Jerusalem. And that's interesting. Now, for one thing, most of us here in the West are not really aware that the Sanhedrin has been reconstituted. And usually when you see news reports that even mention it, even coming out of Israel, they use words like nascent, which means new, growing, forming, not really fully developed yet, that kind of thing. But when you talk to people who are a little more plugged into religious circles in Jerusalem or in Israel, like Messianic Rabbi Zev Porat, he says, no, the Sanhedrin has been around for a long, long time, and it never really went away. And it's got a lot more power and influence than people want to admit. So the Sanhedrin is making it clear to the 2 candidates, one of which will be elected mayor on Tuesday, that they need to be thinking about the Third Temple. Now, Leon is an observant Jew, and in the city of Jerusalem, this is important because about 35% of the voters are Haredi, or what might be called ultra-Orthodox. So that is a 35% of the Jewish vote in Jerusalem. Let me correct myself. Berkovich is a secular guy who wants to get businesses to open up on the Sabbath, which would be a big deal. So you got a couple of different worldviews there competing for mayor in Jerusalem this coming Tuesday. And, of course, the Sanhedrin weighing in on this and wanting to remind them that they need to be thinking about the Third Temple. And when you can consider that and how different that is from here in the United States, where just saying "In God We Trust" or putting "In God We Trust" on the back of a police car causes liberals' heads to explode. I mean, at least we're not dealing with, something that is of prophetic importance. I mean, biblical proportions. So, an interesting election coming up on Tuesday in Israel as they run off the final two candidates for mayor. Back into politics here in the United States, the creepy porn lawyer, Michael Avenatti, just will not go away. Of course, he was the guy who represented Stormy Daniels in her claims of whatever her claims were against Donald Trump. I won't even get into that. And then, of course, he brought forth somebody to accuse Judge, now Justice Brett Kavanaugh during his confirmation hearings. Well, apparently, Avenatti has found a new way to worm back into the public dialogue here in the United States. He says he's going to file a lawsuit against Fox News host Tucker Carlson over a confrontation that took place at a restaurant at a country club in Virginia back in October. Avenatti tweeted a video out Saturday night showing Carlson in a verbal altercation with the man who is apparently preparing the lawsuit. Avenatti wrote, quote, "We are investigating an alleged assault on a gay Latino immigrant committed by T. Carlson and or members of his inner circle at a club in Virginia in October. It likely includes underage drinking in violation of Virginia law. Link to a portion of the incident. We are attempting to locate additional witnesses and to identify those depicted in the video," and so forth. Apparently, according to Carlson's version of the story, the man filing the lawsuit got verbally abusive with Tucker's daughter, and that Tucker's son went back into the restaurant and threw a glass of red wine on the guy after confirming that he did, in fact, use some very foul language to refer to Tucker Carlson's daughter. We'll see where this goes. The main point here is that Michael Avenatti wants to keep himself in the limelight. He has no shame. Sadly, maybe sadly for Democrats, actually, he may be the most viable candidate they'll be able to come up with for 2020. I mean, think about it. If you need somebody who can play Donald Trump's game and even go farther, you might need to run somebody like Avenatti. Now, I think, he's getting very close to the end of his 15 minutes of fame. I think this is despicable. If Tucker Carlson's account of what happened is accurate, I think there are going to be a lot of fathers and husbands in the United States that are going to, empathize and sympathize with Tucker Carlson. We'll see where this goes, but the point is that this is all about Michael Avenatti, not about justice or anything else. Ballot initiatives from Tuesday. Of course, you know that the Democrats took control. Well, not control, but at least they are now the majority party in the House of Representatives. I know that a number of friends of mine, conservatives, were very disappointed that the Republicans weren't able to hold on to the House of Representatives. That's not as big a deal as you might think. I mean, yes, it probably means 2 years of gridlock. Already we're hearing from Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff, who is going to assume the chairmanship of the House Intelligence Committee from Devin Nunes, that we're going to see lots and lots of investigations coming in January. And I talk about a few of those on tomorrow's 5 and 10 update at Skywatch TV. But historically speaking, this was really expected. Over the last century, there have only been 3 times when the party holding the White House gained seats during a midterm election in the House of Representatives. That's just the way we Americans go. You got a guy in the White House, after a couple of years, You're getting a little tired of him, and so you vote for the other party. Because the other party's got a great target that they can use, that they can run on to get back their seats in the House of Representatives. The only 3 times over the last 100-plus years where the party in the White House gained seats in the House were really exceptional cases. 1934, which was the beginning of the Great Depression, and Franklin Roosevelt was rolling out his New Deal and basically promising a lot of free government stuff, more or less. I mean, okay, shovel-ready work projects, that sort of thing. And you can see why people who were really struggling since the big crash in 1929 would want to give the president a majority so he could continue with that policy. So that was kind of exceptional. Next time was 1998. It didn't happen again for 64 years. 1998, what was happening then? Bill Clinton was being impeached by the Republicans in the House of Representatives. And frankly, I think people got a little sick of it. The Democrats were able to pick up some seats in the House in that midterm election. And then 4 years later, it happened in 2002. But remember, 9/11. 9/11 was just 1 year earlier. And President George W. Bush was still riding a pretty high wave of public approval. So those are the only 3 times over the last century when the party in the White House gained seats in the midterm election. Really, the Republicans didn't lose as many seats as historically you would expect. And the fact that the Republican Party gained seats in the Senate is actually a much bigger deal. Why? Because President Trump and his surprising ally, Senator Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, are approving justices at on the federal bench, appeals court, circuit court, and of course 2 Supreme Court justices, that will reshape the federal judiciary for decades to come. In fact, this past week, Politico, which is not a conservative political news publication, wrote that, remember, this is the night before the election, they put out a piece on Monday that said even if the Democrats win back the House of Representatives, President Trump has won the courts for decades to come. Reshaping the federal courts is a big deal because most of these cases that deal with social issues like same-sex marriage, transgender bathrooms, things like that, will get decided at the circuit court level, the federal circuit court level, and won't get to the Supreme Court. And the president and Senator McConnell have made it a priority to get justices appointed, judges appointed, and confirmed. And they've gotten more judges confirmed than any president in recent memory, undoing something that liberals have been doing for the last half a century. They've been getting judges approved and justices approved who want to follow the law, not make law. And that is a big deal because that pushes power from the federal government back to the states where it belongs. Now, we here in Missouri might not like what the legislature in California decides to pass, the laws that they pass out there. And conversely, the people running the state in California probably think we're a bunch of jerkwater hicks out here in Missouri. Don't care. I would rather have our legislature in Jefferson City, as imperfect as it is, deciding what we do here in Missouri rather than liberal justices sitting in Washington, D.C. So that is why this is a big deal. By gaining a couple of seats in the Senate, and it looks like the way things are going, the seats that Republicans thought they might have picked up Tuesday night in Arizona and Florida appear to be slipping away. Don't have time to go into some of the odd things happening with the recounts or the late ballots, the surprise ballots, and so forth. But even so, Republicans have picked up a couple of seats, and those seats have been filled, like Blackburn in Tennessee taking the seat of Bob Corker with somebody who is a supporter of President Trump instead of a squishy never-Trumper. So the point is that in order to get these justices confirmed now, McConnell and Trump will not have to depend on squishy Republican in name only never-Trumpers to hold fast and vote their way. They've got a little more of a cushion to work with. And according to Politico, this will change the shape of American politics behind the scenes for the next 30 or 40 years. So this was a good thing. And quite frankly, and we'll talk about some of this in the last segment after 8:30 Central Time tonight. Democrats may be pressured by the most vocal segment of their base into doing what Republicans did back in 98. In other words, pushing too hard against Trump and causing a red wave in 2020. The Trump slide. We shall see. But, well, one of the things that we've been watching at Skywatch TV, and if you've been watching over the last month, you've seen some wonderful interviews with a couple of remarkable young men who've written an important new book that you need in your reference library because it documents and identifies pagan teachings that are entering into the churches here in America. Sadly, we don't know enough doctrine to know what we should be righteously angry about. The Second Coming of the New Age is the book. Josh Peck, Steven Bancarz join us next on A View from the Bunker.
We've been told that America is a Christian country from its origin, one nation under God. We've been taught that our government is for the people, by the people. But what if it's all been just a grand deception? What if the God, worshipped in secret by government leaders in our nation's capital, is in fact our enemy? And many of our leaders have been venerating him secretly through arcane rituals, setting the scene for the incarnation of this ancient entity.
They used the powerful energy of ninth-degree sex magic, through which the goddess Babylon herself might appear in human form.
What if everything we thought we knew about this great nation was designed to bring about the greatest conspiracy of all time? A conspiracy for the souls of humanity. What if I told you that America was founded by the darkest elite secret societies, and that there are still powerful remnants controlling hands in high positions, carrying this torch? Dr. Thomas Horn, William Ramsey, Russ Dizdar.
It's like God ripped open Hell's Kitchen and said, hey, here's some of the sequence of satanic evolution.
Colonel Robert McGinnis, Wes Fall, Carl Teichrob, Justin Fall.
It is the ritual that would ignite the resurrection of the Antichrist.
Belly of the Beast.
The holidays are rapidly approaching, and now's your chance to save big on the largest TV giveaway of the year. Skywatch TV is proud to announce the Belly of the Beast Grand Giveaway. In the brand new documentary, Belly of the Beast, you'll discover for the first time why a Bible is bound in a magic square inside the testes of the Washington Monument, where and why a buried ancient magical obelisk awaits underground nearby, where the entrance to a secret crypt exists connected to American Lucifer worship from within the deep state. And for the first time ever, the U.S. government-owned location where the Antichrist will be resurrected on American soil. When you order Belly of the Beast from Skywatch TV, you'll also receive Lady Queensborough's celebrated original 1933 Occult Theocracy 2-volume collection, beautifully republished by Defender Publishing. These books are classic exposés on the secret societies, from witches to Knights Templar, Freemasons to Rosicrucians, Druids to the Illuminati, Masonic and pagan symbols, Christian Science, the Order of the Jesuits, and so much more. Dr. Thomas Horn says no serious researcher's library is complete without this massive 2-volume collection. These 2 books alone hold a retail value of $80. Yours now, free when you purchase the Belly of the Beast Grand Giveaway. But we're just getting started. You'll also receive a gargantuan supply of brand new, super quality, overstock gift books, DVDs, audio sets, survival and organic living books, and more to add to your library or to give away as gifts this holiday season. Sold separately, this grand giveaway holds a retail value of over $350. Yours now for your donation of only $35 plus shipping and handling. So don't delay. This avalanche of holiday gifts This is perfect for the serious researcher in your life, but is only available while supplies last. So take advantage of this, the largest Skywatch TV giveaway of 2018, while you can when you order the Belly of the Beast Grand Giveaway, now at the Skywatch TV store. Order online or call 1-844-750-4985.
Driving the internet to think. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to talk about a miracle in California. And if ever a state needed some good news, it is California, and it is right now. We'll talk about that after 8:30 tonight. But now, a couple of remarkable young men I've had the opportunity and the privilege to interview over the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks or so. And one of whom I actually get to work with, which is leads to a lot of really intriguing conversations at the office. They are the co-authors of an important new book published by Defender Publishing, available now from Defender. You can find it at the Skywatch TV store, skywatchtvstore.com, or Amazon.com. The book is The Second Coming of the New Age, and we welcome to the program. And we're hoping that the engineer here, which is me, has wired this correctly. Steven Bancarz and Josh Peck. You find them online. Steven at reasonsforjesus.com. Josh Peck, disclosure.com. Gentlemen, welcome to A View from the Bunker.
Hey, thanks for having us on.
Thanks.
All right. Well, we got this going. We got a whole new setup here in the new office. And again, without having an engineer who only has to focus on, playing with knobs and twiddling dials and stuff, it's a little unique, but we're off to a good start. Second Coming of the New Age. Josh, if you had to describe the book in like the elevator pitch, what is the book about?
Well, I'll first tell you, you and your audience, what it's not about. It is not me and Steve's personal testimonies coming out of the New Age. That is a part of it, but we kept that part extremely brief because I think what the public needs more than another testimony book about coming out of New Age, because there's a few of those, is a serious look at apologetics, what New Age teaches, how New Age has infiltrated the church today, and what we as Christians can do about it, and also the alarming reality that over half, significantly over half, it's actually, I believe it's closer to 100% than it is closer to 50% of Christians hold at least one New Age belief without knowing it, because this stuff isn't typically labeled as New Age to Christians. It's labeled in Christian terms and Christianese. So all of that, really the book is how a person can identify the New Age beliefs that have crept into their lives, which there was a recent research study, I think it was Pew Research, that did this study, and they only tested for 4 parameters. They only tested for 4 New Age beliefs, and they found out that 61% of Christians have at least one New Age belief. Now, there's hundreds of New Age beliefs. They only tested for 4, and they actually tested for more of the four of some of the more extreme ones. So it's mind-boggling to think that, for one thing, over half of your congregation at church has at least one New Age belief in these 4 categories. But more likely, it's way over half. I would say it's easily 90%, probably even closer to 95%. And it's because people just don't know this stuff is New Age. So in our book, we lay out all of the practices and things going on in church today that actually is New Age, but is being called Christianity. So everybody who gets the book, they'll be able to look into their own lives. They'll be able to get this stuff out of their lives, and it shows why it's so dangerous. And then again, just real quickly, me and Steven came out of the New Age. So Steve, he can tell his own story, but he was one of the most famous New Age bloggers that, not even that long ago. And so we know what we're talking about and how subtle this deception really is.
Well, Steven, talk a little bit about that, because your YouTube video, I recall a video that was sent to me by somebody maybe a year and a half ago that was shot, I think, in the front seat of your car. And I watched it and thought, wow, that's a really remarkable story, but not having the same frame of reference as Josh, somebody who was into the New Age movement. It probably didn't resonate with me the way it did with Josh. And I think God probably had a better plan than, with Josh reaching out to you anyway. What was it about the New Age and New Age teachings that drew you in, and were you raised in the New Age? I guess is the first point. How did you get from birth to, one of the leading New Age teachers, speakers, bloggers on the internet?
Yeah, to answer the second question, I was born and raised in a Christian household, and I got my hand when I was in high school. Early on, when I was in high school, I was obsessed with Christian apologetics, actually, and I was homeschooled under a Christian curriculum up until grade 7, so I had a really sheltered Christian life. And when I got my hands on some ufology, some extraterrestrial research, that's when I started to have, biblical fundamentalism. It didn't seem as comprehensive and as it didn't seem like it was the finished product. It didn't seem like it was the only answer, because I was coming across bits and pieces of research and anecdotes that I couldn't fit into, a 6-day biblical narrative. And so I basically started to think to myself, okay, maybe Christianity is just one piece of the puzzle instead of being the whole answer. And a lot of people who end up teaching what I was into, which is ancient astronaut theory. I was obsessed with the Ancient Aliens program. People on that program, if you follow them and you follow up with some of these speakers, such as David Wilcock, who was on the first 3 seasons very frequently, and he was one of the most prominent New Age teachers in the world, and I was obsessed with his material, and I was just absolutely consuming it. And I guess what led me into the New Age movement was the presentation of New Age thought and practice as being true, and me seeing evidence and research that seemed to confirm that it's true. And that's just being honest. So I'm talking about evidence for things like our consciousness being able to impact the material world in some way. That maybe consciousness isn't something that goes on within the confinements of the physical brain. Maybe it's something more ethereal that kind of goes outward and interacts with the physical world or the minds of other people. And we're talking about research coming from the Institute of Noetic Sciences, other research from, Dr. Jim Tucker or Ian Stevenson for the alleged evidence for reincarnation. And I guess what I was having all this evidence from near-death experiences and so forth, pyramid technology. And I was like, okay, there's something really fishy going on here. And church isn't addressing it. The Bible's not addressing it. Friends and family aren't addressing it who are Christian. And, I didn't have a resource like this, like the Second Coming of the New Age, available. So I thought, okay, here is evidence for something paranormal, something metaphysical, something beyond what I've been taught, in my Christian upbringing. Really, I can leave my body. I'm having out-of-body experiences and then interact with beings in another realm. That's crazy. So I guess what the real deception was I was deceived into thinking that this was true and safe, when some of it's true but extremely dangerous and condemned in Scripture for being such. But also I didn't have any material to lead me through these ideas, lead me through these concepts, show me how to debunk them scientifically, show me how to debunk them philosophically, show me how to debunk them scripturally. And so I was, a young Christian. I identified with the Christian worldview. I wasn't necessarily born again. And I was very easily deceived because there was nobody giving answers to these questions that I could find. And this was back in, maybe 2010, around that time. And so in 2012, I made a Facebook page. It grew to over, 750,000 followers. And then January of 2014, I launched a website that was kind of a culmination of my research because so many people are thirsty for supernatural understanding, for supernatural wisdom. And I thought I had it. So I had this website, culmination of my research. I was getting, hundreds of thousands of views a day. My first month, I made over $60,000 in ad revenue. Because I had such a large social media network, I was networking with the largest New Age Facebook pages in the world, and I was actually a lead author on the largest New Age website in the world for a while. My website was one of the largest, and it took me seeing the fruitlessness of the New Age movement, and my hope is that this book will prevent people from getting to that state and just get in the truth now, have the truth set them free now, before they destroy their own lives and the lives of others around them with New Age spirituality. And then I had an encounter in the presence of Jesus where in a 5-minute span I was born again. I was filled with the Holy Spirit. I quit my job the next day, sold my house, sold my car, and here I am talking with you guys. And it's awesome, Derek, because I used to watch Skywatch TV. When I got saved, I'd watch it every day because it was the only ministry who was really addressing these things I was learning about, talking about giants in the ancient world, that were evidence apparently of extraterrestrial inbreeding, talking about just different supernatural topics that the church didn't normally address. And I was like, wow, this is the stuff that I was learning about, but this is biblically grounded. This is kind of, an apologetic response to these things. And so, I appreciate your ministry, Derek, and the ministry of Skywatch, because Christians need answers to these kinds of questions, because as Josh just pointed out, this is the religious and spiritual movement that is deceiving Christians right now, and that's deceiving our world. It's the vast majority of philosophical belief. It's New Age. You got 62% of the American public believing, just 4 of the New Age beliefs they tested for. We're talking things like reincarnation. So there's a theological crisis in the church right now and in our culture. And that's what this book is meant to address. We're talking with Steven Bancarz and Josh Peck. They're the co-authors of the new book, The Second Coming of the New Age, on A View from the Bunker. Josh, the teachings that are most commonly showing up in churches, what are they, and what should people be looking for coming through the front door of their church?
Well, there's a couple different categories. There are some that are extremely subtle that most people wouldn't catch. There's some more extreme examples that a lot of people seem to want to hear about because they don't know that this is going on. So there are things called angel boards and destiny cards. These are actual Ouija boards and tarot cards. It is the same thing. They're used the same way. The only difference is that they have angels painted on them. But these are being sold and used and practiced in mainstream churches in America today. Most people's local church might not have something like that, but they might have something like labyrinth prayer, where in Baptist churches today, in some Baptist churches today, pastors will teach their congregation to go out. Usually it's outside, sometimes it's inside, but walk this labyrinth, this circle. It's not really a maze. It's something that only has one entrance and one end point. It doesn't have a bunch of branching off paths like a maze does. But the idea is to walk along this path, and while you're doing this, you're supposed to be doing a lot of self-introspection. You're supposed to be thinking about the self and all this stuff. That's how all of this stuff is packaged. It's all on realizing the way that it's packaged to Christianity is realizing who you are in Jesus instead of realizing who Jesus is in you. That's the important difference there that a lot of Christians don't catch, because there's a lot of churches, most churches, in these subtle ways. A lot of churches have sprung up after the self-esteem movement of the 90s. It started then. Maybe it started a little bit earlier in the 80s, but it really got a lot of ground in the 90s. I mean, I was a child of the 90s, and I remember growing up with these commercials and public service announcements and things like that, where people are told that they are great exactly how they are, and they deserve to be accepted in society exactly how they are. That's not true. Now, I don't want anybody to have any harm come to them. We should not be hating anybody. That's a totally different issue. But the idea that we're fine how we are is straight up satanic, because we're not. It goes against the Bible. If we were okay how we are, and if we were supposed to be accepted the way we are right now, then why did Jesus die on the cross? The whole idea behind Christianity is we're not okay how we are, but we're all in the same boat. We're all in that same boat. None of us are okay how we are. That's why we need Jesus for salvation, because we can't attain it ourselves. The self-esteem movement, in a subtle way, told people they could attain salvation on their own. That's what the New Age teaches, and unfortunately, that's what a lot of churches teach nowadays. They won't say it usually that explicitly, but they'll do it in really subtle ways by the pastor kind of being more of a motivational speaker and trying to tell his congregation that they're just great how they are. Some other things that have come in is this idea that if we just have the right attitude about things, then things will just generally work out. That's not true either. There is a very real spirit of chaos that inhabits the earth, and we write about this in the book too, and always has, basically since creation. It's talked about in the Bible. That's actually what Leviathan is. There's a lot of material on that we delve into the book, and Derek, you and I even got into some of that material in our book, The Day the Earth Stands Still. But we live in a reality where there is chaos. There just is. But the beautiful part about this story is that right now, the Lord God is subduing chaos. Chaos will eventually be vanquished. Before chaos is vanquished, before the new heavens and the new earth and all that, chaos will be kind of set free for a while. We read a lot about that in the book of Revelation. That's what happens when God doesn't subdue chaos anymore. But right now, God is subduing chaos. We can't do that. We can't subdue the own chaos in our own lives just by thinking good thoughts or by having the right attitude or staying away from using certain phrases or words. Or it doesn't work that way. The way that we can mitigate chaos in our own lives is through subjection to Jesus Christ. By giving it to Jesus, he's the one that can do this. He's the one that can root out chaos in our lives, or at least help us manage it when it comes, and it's going to come. And I think that it does a disservice to Christians to try to convince them that that's not going to happen. So we try to equip people with, like, look, we live in a fallen world. Chaos is going to come into your life. Bad things are going to happen. But it's okay, because if you follow Christ, he's subduing chaos right now. He's in control of it. That's what it means, that he's ultimately in control. And if you submit to him, somehow or another, it's going to be okay. You know, that's something that's never preached in the church, is that we're always safe. And it's not because we have good thoughts. It's not because we like to think that we're good people, even though we're not. Every single one of us is wicked and in need of salvation from Jesus. We're in need of repentance and all this stuff. But that's... I kind of lost my train of thought there.
Well, no, I think that
in church, we're instead taught this idea that we're okay how we are, and as long as we have good thoughts, that things will just work out. And it's not true. It is a blatant lie, and that is setting up Christians to fail. That's why so many Christians today have such weak theology. So we try to correct all of this in our book.
Well, Stephen, Josh raises a good point that this idea that we can somehow manage chaos on our own is a really appealing teaching. There have been some stories published in various journals lately. In fact, Tom Horn has been doing a really good job of keeping tabs on these at skywatchtv.com on the growth of witchcraft. There was one just published the other day about how women are gravitating toward witchcraft because they feel it gives them a sense of power or control that they weren't getting with what they were hearing in church. Now, Josh, I think, makes a really good point. Bad things are going to happen. Chaos is going to break out in our lives, and there are times we're going to feel like we are just totally adrift. How do we make the case that, hey, just because you feel like you're lost at this moment in time doesn't mean that you need to take matters, or that you even can take matters in your own hands?
Yeah, I guess the answer comes down to what your metaphysics is. If you believe that the universe is some kind of living organism that has the property of consciousness and that is going to reflect into your reality things that are aligned with your dominant thoughts and your dominant emotions. So if you believe that the universe is built like some giant elastic band, where if you're putting out positivity and if you're putting out just wholesome thoughts and wholesome attitudes, that you're going to be rich. That, if you live from this position of thinking your children won't be deceived, that's an invitation to the universe to help make sure that your children aren't going to be deceived or aren't going to be drug addicts or so forth. If you believe that, the universe is built to be responsive to the human will, and that it's actually animate and that it's intelligent in that sense, then of course you can take matters into your own hands. You are God in the sense of you create your own reality by what you choose to project outward into the world. It's called the law of attraction. It's written in the book called The Secret. And so if you believe that that's how the universe is built, then yeah, you can take matters into your own hands. If you realize that, Scripture deems that absolutely impossible, that God is sovereign, that the universe is inanimate, that you have a creator-creation distinction, very clearly in Scripture. One of our chapters, chapter 5, it's about pantheism, this idea that God is somehow equivalent to the natural world. And if you believe that God is the natural world and can be manipulated as some kind of force of providence that responds to your own manifestations of energy, your own manifestations of emotion and thought, then yeah, you can solve your own problems. But if you understand, hey, there's a creator-creation distinction, the dust on the floor of your kitchen is not God. The rock out at the local park is not God. God is enthroned in the heavens and distinct from creation. If you know that you're not God, the Bible says, put fear in them, O Lord, let the nations know they are but men. The Egyptians are man and not God. Their horses are flesh and not spirit. Then you realize, wait a minute, there's someone who created the universe who's more sovereign, who is all-knowing. And what the New Age movement story wants to do, it really wants to try to infiltrate human thinking and deceive them into thinking that they really have the properties of God, that they have the properties of omniscience, that they have the properties of being able to control everything in their life. And it really does go back to this idea. There's a bunch of different ways that the New Age movement deceives people into thinking that they are God. And the primary way is they'll tell them that they're God ontologically, that they're equivalent to God because they're made of the substance of God or the energy of God. And therefore, all they have to do is kind of cultivate this and self-realize into this state of God consciousness and become, enlightened or become like Jesus was.
So you practice the correct spiritual disciplines, you can actually become God yourself.
Well, no, not become God. They would say you're God already, whether you recognize it or not.
Oh, I see. It's just we've forgotten.
Right. You've forgotten who you are. You're the creator with amnesia. And you came here to experience, everything that you can experience and take it back home. And the creator's kind of learning through you, through the unfolding of your consciousness. That's the creator learning new things about itself.
So like a giant artificial intelligence that we're a giant neural network, a cosmic neural network that we're having to program?
It's more like this. It's more like there's one universal consciousness, one universal substance, and that universal consciousness and substance takes on the form of human identity and is pretending to be Derek Gilbert right now. I mean, really, it's, this universal, infinite, impersonal field of consciousness, but it has kind of taken on this role for the purpose of learning about itself, of being a human being who has a personal ego, who has, a job and so forth. And so the reason why we suffer so much and the reason why we are, spiritually asleep and spiritually malnourished is because we don't realize that we are intrinsically one with the creator. And so they would say we're God ontologically because everything in the universe is made of the substance of God. The universal consciousness, or what the Hindus would call Brahman, or, what David Wilcock would call the source field. Even Oprah Winfrey defines God as this way. She says God is the all is God. And so if you realize that, then, hey, I'm God too. I'm God by nature. And so they'll teach man's God by nature. They'll also teach him that he's man metaphorically in the sense that he kind of creates his own reality each day with the way he chooses to look at things and so forth. But it does come down to wanting to put the attribute of sovereignty into the hands of man when chaos comes. And to take matters into their own hands instead of submitting and subjecting themselves to the creator. And that's one of the reasons why it's extremely, extremely destructive. It's because people aren't fit to be their own gods.
Oh, amen to that. Well, we're going to talk about how this teaching is working its way into the church, what these teachings look like. In fact, very timely, because just recently the founder of a spiritual discipline that is being promoted in many churches. It's coming out of Roman Catholicism, but it's really Eastern mysticism repackaged. We'll talk about that as soon as we tell you how you can get this book so that you can prepare yourself to answer these questions and recognize these deceptions when they enter your congregation. The book is The Second Coming of the New Age. The authors, Steven Bancarz and Josh Peck, join us. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.
Churches and educational establishments from universities down to elementary schools are embracing New Age philosophy and are being seduced by heavy demonic forces that are masquerading as angels of light, ascended masters, spirit guides, and even Jesus Christ himself. Skywatch TV is proud to announce the second coming of the New Age official collection. When you order the new book, The Second Coming of the New Age by Steven Bancarz and Josh Peck, you'll receive the brand new DVD Beyond Supernatural, which includes never-before-released off-the-record interviews with the authors, detailing their long history of involvement with the New Age and personal testimonies of their deliverance by Jesus Christ. And as a bonus, this DVD includes the entire Skywatch TV 5-part series exposing the infiltration of the New Age. Plus, you'll also receive on DVD The Book of Enoch, Fallen Angels, and Ancient Aliens, an exclusive production with Dr. Michael Heiser regarding the blatant lies of ancient astronaut theory and the horrifying nature of fallen angels and alien abduction. Also included is the brand new audio series Doctrines of Devils. Listen as Steven Bancarz interviews Doreen Virtue, world-renowned former best-selling author and teacher for the New Age, as she explains her incredible supernatural journey out of the occult and into the arms of Jesus. This over 12-hour series features bonus interviews with Dr. Chuck Missler, Dr. Thomas Horn, John McTernan, Gary Bates, and many more on the subjects of ghosts, demons, and the supernatural. But that's not all. You'll also receive the oversized, beautifully republished classic masterpiece in hardback, Myths and Legends of Babylonia and Assyria. This work provides not only the account of the mysteries of the ancients, but extracts and presents to the reader the occultism driving much of the New Age and heretical doctrines today. Sold separately, these items hold a retail value of over $150. Yours now for your donation of only $35 plus shipping and handling. You can have access to everything you need to arm yourself against the onslaught of pervading spiritual darkness now. The Second Coming of the New Age official collection is available now at skywatchtvstore.com. Order now or call 1-844-750-4985.
The talk equivalent of a flying drop kick to bad theology. This is A View from the Bunker, coming to you live from a ridgetop location deep in the heart of the Missouri Ozarks. I'm Derek Gilbert. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, we're going to talk about some good news from the state of California, a miracle, and doctors are confirming it, and also climatologists warn us to prepare for the coming rat apocalypse. I put that out there for those of you who are skipping the Walking Dead tonight. So, welcome back to A View from the Bunker. We're into hour number 2. I'm Derek Gilbert. Joining us, our special guest tonight, the authors of an important new book that we highly recommend, The Second Coming of the New Age, Steven Bancarz and Josh Peck. Their websites, reasonsforjesus.com. Josh, you can find at joshpeckdisclosure.com. Gentlemen, there was a gentleman who recently passed, who's had a lot of influence on certain spiritual disciplines that are being promoted actively in a number of different denominations, Christian churches around the world. This is the Trappist monk, Father Thomas Keating, who is essentially the father of a practice called contemplative prayer or centering prayer. I'll throw this out there, whoever wants to take this one, because I think this is an interesting concept and one that has gotten a lot more traction inside Christian churches here than it should. What is centering or contemplative prayer, and why is it something we should be very, very alarmed about?
That is something that Steve is definitely more of an expert in than I am. He literally wrote the chapter on it in the book.
Right. So basically, it's essentially the entire purpose of centering prayer or contemplative prayer. It doesn't mean to pray contemplatively. I mean, there's a difference between praying contemplatively in the sense of being honest and reflective before the Lord about your sin and about what's going on in your soul, and trying to shift your consciousness by chanting a mantra over and over in your head because you think that God exists in the realm of pure consciousness beyond the mind. I mean, one is biblical. One is King David in the Psalms. The other is just mysticism. It's literally Eastern mysticism. So, as you said, Keating is one of the pioneers. There's a few other pioneers as well. Another one named Merton. Another one named Pennington. Here's a quote by Keating. So he says that God and our true self are not separate. God and our true self are the same thing. So the purpose of contemplative prayer is to still the mind, where you go beyond, this kind of object-subject dichotomy that we have in our theology, where we're man and then God is God and we're separate, and to enter into this realm, as Pennington describes it, of being pure consciousness. You want to become pure consciousness by shifting your brainwave state, by shifting your psychology through. You're going to find a quiet place. You're going to find a word and repeat it over in your head, over and over and over again. You're going to make no vertical connection between you and God. It's all horizontal. It's just self-idolatry. And the purpose is to shift consciousness and enter into this meditative state where you kind of go beyond the mind. You transcend the mind. It's basically transcendental meditation. And the goal is to reach this realization of God and self as being equivalent. And basic research into Merton, Pennington, or Keating indicates that they were mystics in the Eastern sense. They were pantheists in the Eastern sense. It's the exact same thing being taught by Eckhart Tolle. It's the exact same thing being taught by Deepak Chopra. And unfortunately, there's mainline evangelicals, people in the circuit, in the community, who offer praise to these men and to these kinds of prayers, not realizing that what they're advocating is the deity of man and a mystical practice that's meant to bring man into self-knowledge and self-awareness of himself as being God by meeting him in this state of pure consciousness. So it's just New Age doctrine. There's no other way to put it.
Well, Josh, how is this kind of thinking, whether it's called contemplative prayer, centering prayer, or any other teaching like this, where we become, and I like the expression, the creator-creation distinction, where we lose that acknowledgement of the difference between us and God. How is that being Christianized and packaged and sold to Christians who ought to know better?
Oh yeah, I mean it's big time, because many of the mega church, the most well-known pastors today teach this kind of stuff. It is more focused on your relationship with Jesus instead of Jesus' relationship with you, or it's more focused on it's just very self-focused. Like Stephen said, it's self-idolatry. We should be focused more on Jesus than we are on ourselves. The only time that I think, and actually we could as Christians use a lot more of this, the times where we need to focus on ourselves, those are the times where we need to compare ourselves against Jesus and see, okay, here are all the areas where I need to improve. You don't get that in church. I mean, a lot of mainstream churches, they'll either give you a really fluffy kind of idea of how to live like a good person, but they won't get into the nitty-gritty on why that's important. I mean, like even when I was brought up in church and everything, we were given a lot of lessons on how to be a good person, but the why was never there. Why do we need to be good? And I was led to believe in later years that we be good so God won't be angry with us, and that so we can escape hell. But that's every other religion but Christianity. Christianity teaches that if you accept Jesus, you don't have to worry about hell. But in Christianity, we do good things because we love Jesus. It's not obligatory. It's not because we're trying to earn good favor with Christ. It says in Scripture that Jesus, he died on the cross while we were still yet sinners. While we were still sinning and doing all this bad stuff, he died for us on the cross, and that work is already done. So we don't earn salvation. We don't earn any of this stuff. But by teaching Christians that, either you're good how you are, and since you don't really have to work on yourself, then what you need to do is think good thoughts, because God will like that better, and you'll get rewarded more, and so, just all this ridiculous stuff. It's just not Christianity. It's more comparable to New Age teachings. Obviously, I mean, there's a lot of Eastern influences and that kind of stuff. Even something as simple as the idea of karma is being taught in the church. A lot of them won't call it karma; it'll be Christianized. But how many Christians today think that what goes around comes around? I mean, how many of us think that, if I better not do something, because if I do, then that thing's going to be returned on me, or something similar. See, the reason that we don't do bad things should not be for fear that something bad will happen to us in return. It should be because we love Jesus. He set the example, and we trust him, and we trust that he knows best how we should live our lives. I mean, he was raised from he raised from the dead. Of course, he's going to know more than we do about this stuff. But it's constantly taught in a lot of ways. It's really bad in our culture, and I think that's kind of how it's crept into the churches. It came through the culture first. That's actually part of why it's called Second Coming of the New Age. It's a double meaning, but it's because it came into the culture first back in the 60s and 70s. But now it is alive and well in our churches, which is way more detrimental to Christians. So this kind of thinking is really damaging because it prevents a Christian from actually growing in their faith. And so the result is we have a lot of Christians today who are very confused about salvation, are very confused about the relationship with Jesus, what that should look like, what it should be. And I've since this book has come out, I mean, it's technically, I don't even think it's shipped to anyone yet, but I've gotten so many emails from Christians saying that they are confused about their salvation and they fear hell. I've gotten a lot because I used to be there too. I know exactly what that feels like, and it's horrifying. I mean, every day you think this could be the day that you die, and if you're not in right standing with God, then you're going to go to hell. But a lot of Christians they don't lose that fear after their salvation, after they receive Christ, because they're still stuck in this idea that our culture teaches that they need to be a good person, and it's a work-based salvation which none of us can attain. And I think deep inside all of us know, we all know that. I think every single person, whether they believe in God or not, I think every person on earth deep inside knows that you can't earn your own salvation because you can't attain perfection. There's always something you can improve on. And because of that, and you never know when you're going to die. So because of that, you need somebody else who's going to atone for, all of the corruption and sin that you've wrought throughout your life. And that's what Jesus did on the cross. That message, this should be basic 101 Christianity. I mean, there should be no fear of hell or damnation to any Christian, anybody who's actually given their lives to Jesus and accepted what he did. But unfortunately, and I don't blame Christians for feeling this way. I understand why they feel like that because I did too, and I detail that in the book. But I used to feel that way too. It's just the churches aren't teaching it. The churches are teaching this feel-good message and letting the culture seep into the church. It's just detrimental. So now we have a lot of Christians like this. It blew my mind when Steve and I first started talking about writing this book. We did some research to see what books are already on the market. Any author does that. Before they write a book, they'll see what similar titles are out there already so they can have their work set apart. We couldn't find anything. And I think that our book, I mean, it's easy enough for anybody to understand. Anybody's going to be able to read this book and understand it just fine, and they're gonna have the knowledge that they need as Christians, not only to continue in their relationship with Jesus, but to also talk other Christians out of this New Age stuff, or even talk New Agers into Christianity. And all that stuff. It blew my mind that there is not a book like this out there. Where have Christians been? It has been decades since we've needed a book like this. I certainly needed it. I know Steve needed it. So, yeah, I mean, that to me is surprising, but that's how it's getting in the churches.
Well, it is surprising that since Constance Cumby wrote Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow decades ago. So, yeah, this is the long overdue. The book, of course, we're talking about is The Second Coming of the New Age. Josh Peck and Steven Bancarz join us on A View from the Bunker. Steven, you mentioned something in the first segment about not getting answers to things that really intrigued you. And, Josh, you've talked about this in the past as well. The UFO phenomenon and other things that appear almost miraculous, like the secret, the law of attraction, or how weird quantum physics appears to violate the laws of physics. They appear supernatural in the way they react. And these things are not being addressed sufficiently in the Christian church, or even at all. I remember the Stephenville, Texas UFO flap some years ago. L.A. Marzulli offered to fly to Texas on his own dime and speak at churches about what kind of deception this was from a supernatural perspective, and he didn't get any takers at all. None of the pastors there wanted to touch the issue. So, Stephen, why do you think, if you had to speculate, aren't pastors addressing these types of issues?
Yeah, I would say that pastors probably aren't addressing it because they don't know about it. They aren't taught it in seminary. They aren't taught it in Bible college. When really it's dominating our culture.
Well, that's the big issue there. As you guys say, the Pew Research Center study shows more than 60% of Americans believe at least one of these four key or common New Age teachings, which means there've got to be a lot of people sitting in Christian churches on Sunday morning who believe one of these things. So
exactly,
you would
and
think
have 40% of Americans meditate at least once a week, and 36 million Americans are actively practicing yoga, while another 30+ million have tried practicing yoga by going to a yoga studio. You have the psychic services industry, including things like astrology and palmistry. It's a $2 billion industry. It's continuing to grow. Witchcraft is continuing to grow, where witches now outnumber Presbyterians in the country of America for the first time in history. And that's just self-identified witches. A lot of people are into witchcraft in the New Age movement who don't identify as that. You have one of the fastest growing demographics in the religious sector being those who identify as spiritual but not religious. And that's 27% of the American population. You have about 1/3 of Christians, self-professing Christians, mind you, not every professing Christian is born again and actually saved, but 1/3 of professing Christians believe in reincarnation. The idea that you come back here over and over again to work off past karma, like what is that? It's completely contrary to the cross. And so I think the reason why it's not really taught from the pulpit, it's not really addressed by even Christian apologists. And I love people like William Lane Craig.
Mm-hmm.
I love people like Ravi Zacharias does a little bit. I love Frank Turek. You know what I mean? I love John Lennox. All these guys are amazing forces for the kingdom. But if someone were to come up to John Lennox and ask him about, hey, my son is getting into astral projection. There's videos on YouTube with millions and millions of views teaching people how to leave their body, guided meditation. They can walk into any bookstore in America and how to leave their body. How would you help them out of that? What would you say to them? What would you say to someone who wants to go to an ayahuasca ceremony? What would you say to someone who wants to go to a hypnotherapist to have past life regression therapy? You know what I mean? Like and these things I'm talking about, these are international bestsellers talking about past life regression. We're talking hundreds of thousands, millions of copies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's at the forefront of our culture, but Christians are deceived. Christians are deceived into thinking that the primary problem in our culture right now is still atheism. That's kind of what pastors think. Pastors think that I need to combat this onslaught of atheism in our culture. That might have been true 15 years ago, back when Christopher Hitchens was still alive, when you have the four horsemen of Dennett and Harris and Hitchens and Dawkins. But only 3% of Americans now identify as atheist, when 62% hold at least one of the four beliefs they tested for New Age. I mean, there's 10 times more people who identify as spiritual and not religious than atheists. So, I mean, atheism isn't – there was actually an event recently that got canceled with Richard Dawkins at it. He was one of the speakers because nobody wanted to go. Nobody cares anymore. Atheism and naturalism and materialism, that's not the threat for our culture. The threat is people like Jim Carrey going on, playing – I believe he's acting right now for a new video. They're filming a life about Terence McKenna. It's a documentary kind of about Terence McKenna's life. And he's playing Terence McKenna, who was this mystic from the 80s and 90s. He died recently. He really pushed psilocybin mushrooms and other New Age practices and thoughts and so forth. Jim Carrey going to the Maharishi Institute and teaching people transcendental meditation. Oprah Winfrey being the largest New Age teacher, on the planet, telling people, Jesus didn't come here to die for our sins. I'm a Christian, she says, but Jesus came here to teach us Christ consciousness. So I guess pastors don't know that it's as big of a problem as it is when it's being taught by the people like Oprah Winfrey and just actors, and everyone's into meditation now. Ellen's into meditation. They don't realize the pervasiveness of it, and they aren't equipped to deal with these questions. They don't have responses or rebuttals or confutations of these ideas once they're brought to their awareness, because they aren't trained in this area in seminary. And as Josh said, there aren't any really good, sufficient resources available. And so they aren't aware that it exists. And if they aren't equipped with the scripture and the philosophy and the science regarding how to address this. If you have a documentary like What the Bleep Do We Know, where it's talking about the relationship between consciousness and the material world, who is going to, watch that as a Christian and be adequately equipped to address that? We have a section in our book about how the New Age movement perverts quantum mechanics and uses these new studies to push New Age philosophy, and Josh Peck wrote about that. And that's something that a lot of Christians don't have access to. And it's not to bash them. It's not to say that everyone has to be an expert on occult topics. But I do think this: everyone, if they're not willing to study and be an expert on occult topics, they should, at the very least, be able to refer people to resources that do address these things. And so that's why our book, The Second Coming of the New Age, it's perfect for a time like this when New Age is continuing to grow in our culture at numbers never seen before.
Yeah, I'm just going to turn this in a slightly different direction here for our last 10 minutes, just because I'm curious about this. I'm old enough to be both of you guys' father. Don't feel that way, but
but I take any opportunity I have to remind
me.
You
Yeah. I started talking into microphones before you were born. Yes, I know. Both of you gentlemen. And one of the reasons I bring this up is because I'm really glad that we've got guys your age who are addressing these topics, because this problem is something that is really growing amongst millennials, which, people up to 30 years old. Now, Josh, you're a little on the high side of that. But so recently, you all were invited to appear on the Jim Bakker Show. Now, Jim is getting near 80, and he comes from a very different upbringing in terms of his religious upbringing and training, and the group that he's been hanging around with for a very long time. I'm really curious, what kind of response did you guys get when you talked about your book, The Second Coming of the New Age, in front of the Jim Bakker Show studio audience?
Well, I got to be honest. I was actually just talking with Christina about this today. I'm used to, when I put out a new book, I have, probably a dozen or so books out there now, but especially since coming to Skywatch, when I came to Skywatch and started publishing under Defender, the first project I worked on was with Tom Horn, and it was Abaddon Ascending. Then I did a book with you, Derek, which was The Day the Earth Stands Still. I did Unraveling the Multiverse, which was one I wrote on my own, and then now this one. And I've had enough experience where I kind of know what to expect in terms of getting feedback from people. I have never gotten so much feedback from anything I've ever done in my life that I have from this book, and it's not even technically out yet. I mean, it's out, but nobody. I think it just started shipping.
They were packing boxes like crazy when I went over to the office on Friday. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think anybody actually has a copy of it yet, but it's because people are seeing us on Jim Bakker. I'm getting emails, several emails all day. I mean, me and Christina had a date day today, which we have 3 kids and 1 on the way. So date days are very rare. So we take them when we can.
And very important.
We had,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely. We had one today, and, I have my email hooked up to my phone, so I get notified whenever I get a new email. And I'm used to getting, maybe an email every couple of days or something like that. But the way that it's been recently, I can't keep up with it. Like I'm getting so many emails, so many private messages, so many people on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, and it's a lot that I for the first time in my life, I just flat out cannot keep up with it, which is a good problem to have. It's really good. But the information in this book that we talk about on Skywatch TV and Jim Bakker and, several other areas, it's resonating so much with Christians because they just didn't know. Most Christians just don't know what is New Age and what isn't. Most people, when they think New Age, they think of some hippies in the 60s, or they think of like these crazy kooks out in Sedona, Arizona. They think of crystals and Ouija boards, but that's a small portion of it. But that is not the real threat. That's the easy stuff to recognize. The real threat is what's been infiltrating the churches. And since we've been talking about it so openly, and I've lost count, but at one time, me and Steve were keeping count of all the because we've produced a whole bunch of videos on our own too, on our own channels, and we have I don't even know we have a lot. the smallest we have a lot, but Steve might remember the number, I don't, and it's grown since then. But no, the response has been amazing. People are being liberated from the New Age. You know, there's this unfortunate belief that the New Age is really freeing. I used to believe this when I was in New Age. I thought, finally, I'm free from the tyranny of this organized religion called Christianity. You know, I thought all that kind of stuff. But it's not true. That the New Age is a kind of bondage. It is a bondage. It's the bondage of sin that Christ can set you free from. And I didn't realize that until I actually legitimately accepted Christ for myself and then experienced the amazing freedom that comes along with that. So people just listening to the interviews, not even having the book yet at the time of this recording, people are already being set free from all these bondages that they have in their lives. I'm getting testimonies from people thanking us for openly talking about it, saying that they've had a whole bunch of stuff in their lives that they didn't even know was New Age and they didn't know was out of step with a real, you know, good biblical relationship with Jesus. I think just most Christians don't know, and because they're Christians, they're truth seekers. They want to know the truth, and the truth sets you free. That's what it does. That's what Jesus does. So the response has been amazing, and it's people of all ages. You know, Jim Bakker's audience is a little older than my personal audience is, but the response is the same. I'm getting the same types of emails from 80-year-olds and from 15-year-olds, and it's so refreshing and amazing to see. But I have never seen this with any other book or project or anything really that I've ever been involved with, and I'm really happy to see it with this because again, just so many Christians are unknowingly in bondage to the enemy with this stuff. Satan has stolen away a lot of our Christians and taken away a lot of their freedoms that they don't know they could have in Jesus Christ. So I'm hoping with this book and the interviews that we do and all the videos and all the interviews and just all of the stuff that we can be at least a small part in showing Christians how they can be set free too.
Now, Stephen, with just about 4 minutes left here, what do you hope? What do you hope that readers will take away when the books actually get in the hands of people, the second coming of the New Age?
Yeah, I guess what I would hope for, I mean, this is really blunt and to the point. I want people to realize that the teachings of the New Age movement are simply false. Like, it's just not true. Like, you're not God. You're not going to reincarnate here over and over and over again. You know, Jesus wasn't a mystic. Jesus wasn't a Hindu. Jesus wasn't an ascended master like he was taught in Theosophy and in the Ascended Master's teachings of Helena Blavatsky and Alice Bailey and so forth. He wasn't that. That was the first objection people came to me with when I got saved. I was like, okay, Jesus is the Lord, guys. I'm telling, you know, hundreds of thousands of people online that the New Age movement is demonic deception. And that's another thing I want people to realize is that it is supernatural warfare going on for people's souls. And we document in chapter 1, we talk about how the Bible confers that these experiences are valid in the sense of being real, in the sense of it not just being all thin air and fabricated and hallucination, but it ascribes a demonic reality behind them. And so that's our first chapter. We have in the third chapter, we talk about how this has always been linked. New Age philosophy and teaching in the West has always been linked to Luciferian doctrine. Helena Blavatsky being a Luciferian, Aleister Crowley being a Luciferian. There's some very revealing quotes by Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan, where he accuses the New Age movement of stealing from Satanism. And you can go to any, theistic Satanist website, and I don't recommend people going there, but they're going to teach you how to do things, the very things they're teaching people in the New Age movement, how to leave your body, how to open your third eye, how to shift your brainwave states and enter into transcendental meditation. Okay, how to cleanse your chakras, how to use crystals for therapy and so forth. It's the exact same doctrine being taught by spiritual Satanists, and we document that it's always been that way through history. So I want people to realize it's demonically deceptive and dangerous. It's supernatural, and people are playing themselves into the hands of demons. I want people to realize that. Like the Bible says, our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and rulers, spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places in Ephesians 6. And so people need to break free from that. They need to know that there's freedom, there's clarity, there's spiritual life in Christ, while also knowing, hey, okay, I understand it's dangerous and demonic, but I still have these thoughts. I'm still convinced that, God is somehow this force in nature that I interact with. I'm still convinced that, E.T. overrides big biblical fundamentalism. I'm still convinced that, there's other paths to God too. There's just way too many religions in the world for only one of them to be right. So we address these things in the book so people can have their faith rationally grounded. And when they come to Christ, when they read this book front to back, they're going to realize, A, this is demonic and deceptive. B, it's not true, and here are the scientific, philosophical, and scriptural reasons why. And C, how do I get saved? What do I do about it now? We have a chapter talking about deliverance, talking about repentance, how important it is to rid your life of occult objects and paraphernalia that you have in your house that might be giving demons legal ground and legal way into your life to spiritually oppress you. And we have a whole section, I believe it's like 10,000 words or so forth, just outlining the gospel, going through what did Jesus come to do, and how can a New Ager understand this? What's the kind of offer that's on the table, if you will, to the New Ager or to the person seeking the Lord?
Right.
What is included in the atonement? And so I want people to realize it's false, it's deceptive, it is infiltrating the church, but there is a way out, and that's through Jesus Christ.
Steven Bancarz and Josh Peck are the co-authors of the brand new book, The Second Coming of the New Age. It is shipping this week from the warehouse at Defender Publishing. I can vouch for that because, again, I saw the ladies packing boxes like crazy. They'd been pre-packed with the other items that are being offered through the Skywatch TV store at skywatchtvstore.com. Also available through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever fine books are sold. The websites for these young men, Steven Bancarz, reasonsforjesus.com. Josh is at Josh Peck Disclosure.com. And guys, this is much needed, as you say, and it is a pleasure getting to talk to you fellas, because an old guy like me can still learn a few things if we keep our ears open.
Well, pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much, Derek, for inviting us on.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
All right. Remember, that is at skywatchtvstore.com if you want to get your copy, along with a bunch of other stuff that you just... Well, typical of Tom Horn. You cannot beat the offer that he's put together for this book, along with some other really good apologetic resources. The key, starting from the belief that the Apostle Paul knew what he was writing about in chapter 6 of Ephesians. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. Coming up, final thoughts. We'll also talk about some good news from the state of California, desperately needed in California right now, and the coming rat apocalypse. That's ahead as A View from the Bunker continues. I'm Derek Gilbert.
For thousands of years, mankind has debated how creation began. Ancient texts tell us the story. But today, the real message behind the pivotal account of the Garden of Eden has been obfuscated and lost. That is, until now. World-renowned author Carl Gallups digs up the hidden truths from the book of Genesis to finally give back the knowledge that was lost to the world. Find out what really happened in the Garden of Eden, what Jesus taught about Eden on the cross, and how the conflict between Jesus and the gods of antiquity is about to erupt on planet Earth, fulfilling biblical prophecy. In the new book, Gods of Ground Zero, this explains everything.
Cutting-edge analysis of end-times prophecy on the very ground where it all unfolds. It's the Skywatch TV Wars of the Gods Tour of Israel, May 12th through 23rd, 2019, hosted by Derek and Sharon Gilbert. And Pastor Carl Gallups, best-selling author of Gods and Thrones and Gods of Ground Zero, Messianic Rabbi Zev Porat of Messiah of Israel Ministries, and filmmakers Justin and Wes Fall, producers of the Hollow Earth Chronicles. This is a once-in-a-lifetime tour of the Holy Land from Mount Hermon to the Dead Sea. You'll walk in Jesus' footsteps on the battleground of the supernatural war, with preaching and teaching along the way. Shiloh, Bethel, Mount Carmel, Nazareth, the Jordan River, the Mount of Olives, Sea of Galilee, the Garden of Gethsemane, and Jerusalem, where the final battle will be fought for God's Mount of Assembly, Zion. The Skywatch TV Wars of the Gods Tour of Israel. Reserve your place now. For information and registration, log on to lipkintours.com. That's lipkintours.com. Like a cool breeze for your brain. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Next week, we talk about rebooting the Bible. Does it need a reboot? Well, it's a compelling title anyway, and is the latest book from our friend, author, and speaker Doug Woodward. He'll be our guest on A View from the Bunker next Sunday night, November 18th. You join us at vftb.net, Spreaker.com, or download the free mobile app. It's good for iOS, Android devices, and links are at the website vftb.net. A couple of thoughts about the conversation with Steven Bancarz and Josh Peck, Second Coming of the New Age. They made some really good points, especially regarding the reality of these experiences that were typical of the things that led them to delve into the New Age and then dive in head first. When you can see that there are issues being raised that pastors are not addressing, either because they are not aware of the biblical answers, or because they just simply believe that such things don't exist, it is very difficult to teach theology to somebody when they have come to the conclusion that they know more about it than the pastor does. I guess what I'm saying is if somebody comes to a pastor and wants to ask about out-of-body experiences or ghosts, or what they think are ghosts, demon possession, or what they believe to be extraterrestrials, and pastors have no response, or the response is, that stuff doesn't happen. Well, then it's very difficult, again, and can be very dangerous for people who are convinced that they have had real experiences, because these experiences, which may not be physical, are no less real for being spiritual. So that is point one. And besides the Barna Group research, there's a study by the Pew Center research. There's a Barna Group study that is repeated about every 10 years or so, which sort of takes the spiritual temperature of America's Christians. And sadly, it finds that most of us sitting in the pews on Sunday mornings really don't have a firm grasp of Christianity 101. And it's got to begin there. When more than half of America's Christians, almost 60%, don't believe that Satan is real. Well, they're getting that idea from somewhere. And it appears that a lot of this is coming from pastors who are trained at seminary and coming out of seminary with the belief that you can't take the Bible literally when it comes to these supernatural entities. When most American Christians don't believe that Satan or the Holy Spirit are literally real, you got a problem. It's hard to really get yourself geared up to do spiritual warfare if you don't believe the enemy actually exists. But then how do you explain the bad things happening? And then you've got people looking for other answers. If they think that the Bible is nothing more than a long list of thou shalt nots, which really has no power to save you from these supernatural spiritual attacks of the enemy, then people will either reject all faith out of hand, but of course that's not what surveys are showing us. They will more likely turn to alternative spirituality. In other words, what we're seeing, and what the reason Josh and Stephen have written the book, is we are seeing a return to the old paganism. The old gods haven't given up yet. They are still trying to knock Yahweh off his throne. They want control of the Mount of Assembly. And sadly, we are not well equipped for the battle that lies ahead. So, a couple of things tonight as we're recording this on Sunday evening, or broadcasting live actually on Sunday evening. This will be archived, of course, at Spreaker.com and vftb.net. Also at youtube.com/Derek Gilbert once we finish the broadcast tonight in about 9 o'clock Central Time. Of course, fires continue to rage in California. And, I haven't mentioned the chat room at Spreaker.com. And glad to see some of you, engaging one another and communicating back and forth in the chat room. To be honest, I'm probably not going to have a whole lot of time to look at the chat room. I see there's a question I missed more than half an hour ago about posting a video. Really rather not, because we don't really have the resources here on A View from the Bunker to moderate the chat room. Do want to keep it family friendly. In fact, I already tonight had to delete one post that was not appropriate, but it's difficult to carry on a conversation when at the same time trying to read and keep up with what's going on in the chat room, other than just saying, hi, thanks for joining us. But if you're so inclined and you're at Spreaker.com, you can engage and chat back and forth through the chat feature that Spreaker offers. Anyway, as we're broadcasting this Sunday evening, the fires continue in California, and at least one of the folks in the chat room tonight living in California, I'm looking at a map that the National Weather Service has just put out about red flag warning, which has been updated this evening. That's the National Weather Service warning about environmental conditions being conducive to the spread of wildfires. High winds, very dry conditions, low humidity, and apparently, according to the National Weather Service, red flag warnings may continue in parts of California until Wednesday. Until Wednesday. They're calling this, Cal Fire that is, now calling the conditions in the state critical fire weather, and urging people to take precautions. This is incredible. I mean, having grown up in the Midwest, I've seen drought from time to time. Back in 2011 in Illinois, we had corn, which normally is shoulder high by late June, at least, if not taller. That was knee high in September. I mean, that was pretty severe, but that was just the 1 year. Normally, the Midwest gets quite a bit of rainfall. Here in the Ozarks, we will typically, the 4 years we've been here now, we will see it dry up in July and August, but still, I mean, not to the level that they've got in California. Part of the problem, again, I think, is the explosion in the population in California over the last 50, 60 years. There's not a lot of the aquifers there in California, not really intended to support as many people as live there. So you've got that issue. And then if weather patterns change and you're not getting the rainfall that you would normally get on top of the demand for water by the population that lives there, you've got some real issues. On top of the fact that you've now got what used to be semi-arid scrubland or woods that would burn and then kind of regenerate itself, now covered with housing developments and industrial parks. So it's just a problem that is going to get worse unless something is done. And to be honest with you, I don't have a clue as to what's going to be done. I do know one thing you can do tonight, as we mentioned in the first segment tonight. One of the homes affected by the southern fire, one of the southern fires, the Woolsey fire, which has affected Malibu, is L.A. Marzulli. L.A. and his wife Peggy were in Dallas for the Operation Classified conference. That's John B. Wells, host of Caravan to Midnight and Arc Midnight. So they were not there. Thankfully, their daughters, their pets, were not there at home as well. But the home that they've lived in Malibu for many, many years, the guest house that L.A. essentially built himself, destroyed. They were notified by authorities in California that their home is a total loss. So if you can offer some help and you are so led, there are links at LA's website for contributing, helping them to rebuild, and just get through this shortfall until insurance comes through, because insurance adjusters are going to have a really big job ahead of them when these fires are finally put out, which they're not even close to at this point. So lamarzulli.wordpress.com. That's lamarzulli.wordpress.com. If you can go to his website. And again, if you're so led to offer up some support that way. But certainly, if nothing else, your prayers cost you nothing but a few minutes of time. And that I know that they will appreciate as much as anything else. So our prayers for everyone in California, because again, Cal Fire and the National Weather Service warning that it's looking not good. I mean, weather conditions are not cooperating with firefighters out there right now. And it doesn't look like they're going to, at least until the middle of this coming week. Well, A couple of items to touch on, again, as we just kind of wind down the broadcast tonight. The Democrat majority in the House of Representatives obviously has a lot of implications for the country going forward. But one of them is the oversight that they will provide and a direction that they will want to take the armed forces of America. And I am remiss in getting an hour and 45 minutes into the program before saying Happy Veterans Day to the men and women who have served, volunteered to serve in our armed forces. And trust me, having never volunteered and put myself in harm's way, I have no frame of reference of what it's like. But I appreciate, I am glad, I'm thankful that you did, so that guys like me who chose a different path didn't have to. And I just pray that the Democrats taking over the House Armed Services Committee will not begin to undo some of the things that President Trump has been trying to do and the Republican majority had been trying to do to correct 8 years of, I don't know if neglect is the appropriate word, but our friend Lieutenant Colonel Bob McGinnis has basically said the military is not stronger today than it was when Barack Obama took over in 2008. So hopefully, at the very least, having a majority in the Senate, Republicans there will be able to at least put the brakes on some of the things that Democrats may wish to do with the armed services in terms of support for the veterans, our veterans. So, again, thank you, veterans, on this Veterans Day. There clearly are issues that need to be addressed. One of the problems that came out during when Hurricane Michael made landfall at Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida was that not all of the really expensive F-22 fighters were able to get out of the way because not all of them, about 40% of them, were not airworthy, just waiting on repair parts and stuff. So that's something that needs to be addressed. But there's another story that came out this week that's fairly spectacular, and this was the Navy's new aircraft carrier, the most expensive ever, the Gerald R. Ford, the USS Gerald R. Ford, which cost $13 billion. It came out last week that Bloomberg News reported that the carrier was delivered last year without the elevators that it needs to lift bombs from below deck to load them onto fighter jets. And on top of that, it's also got issues with the hook system that is needed to catch planes. I mean, when they land, they've got to slow down in a real hurry because they don't have a lot of runway there on those aircraft carriers. As big as those ships are, those planes come in pretty quick, and they run out of deck pretty fast. So, given that, and the launch system also is creating some problems for the USS Gerald R. Ford. So, given that the main function of this aircraft carrier is to launch fighters that are armed with deadly weapons to address military threats of the United States and then retrieve them safely, it seems like this is a $13 billion boondoggle. So hopefully this is something the military, the Pentagon, will be able to address right now. It's one of those things that it just makes you scratch your head. Hey, how can this even be? Where we've allocated $13 billion trying to field the most powerful Navy on the earth in order to protect our nation from threats from outside, and is put into the Navy's hands without some essential systems needed to perform its its primary function, which is to carry airplanes to deliver weapons on target. Can't launch, can't load bombs on them, and can't retrieve the planes safely, if I understand Bloomberg's report correctly. So, wanted to bring that to your attention. Some good news, and this, again, coming from California, I think is very timely because it's really needed right now. And that is a man in Lodi, California, who's leaving doctors scratching their heads. They don't know what's going on with him. He was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor. And the day before he went in for his scheduled surgery to try to remove this tumor, they did a scan and found that it's gone. He's just disappeared. Fellow's name is, I had it highlighted here, Paul Wood. That's it. Paul Wood is the gentleman's name. This is reported by the CBS affiliate in Lodi, California. So this is coming through mainstream media. This is not, somebody who heard about it from somebody else. This is interesting that because stories like this don't often make it to the mainstream media. Paul Wood went to the doctor because he had headaches that were so intense he couldn't walk down the hallway without leaning against the walls for support. I mean, if your head hurts that badly, there's something really, really wrong. So his primary physician sent him to a neurosurgeon at UC San Francisco, University of California, San Francisco, who thought he had a brain bleed. They did a scan. Radiologists thought they detected a malignant tumor, which certainly would explain crushing headaches. But when he went back the day before surgery, they had to cancel the operation because there was nothing to remove. Scientists say they can't explain it. Wood's doctor can't explain it. They run tests. Doctor says, sometimes things happen we can't explain. But Paul Wood has an explanation. He says it's a miracle, and that is the way God planned it. Sometimes science just has to step back and consider the possibility that these experiences are real and that there are explanations for them that, by definition, are supernatural. So again, some good news at what appears to be a documented miracle coming out of California at a time when a lot of people in California could use some good news right now. The gender identity movement is leading to it's opening the door to some changes in our society that are really disturbing for one, but in some cases just actually silly. And it may be the silly ones that maybe turn the corner and start rolling back some of the things that are happening, some of the changes that have taken place in our society. One of them, by the way, was a ballot initiative in Massachusetts, which confirmed that public restrooms have to be open to whatever gender somebody says he or she feels like in any given day. We're beginning to see some pushback from female athletes who are beginning to realize that men who identify as women are winning trophies, awards, competitions because there's a fundamental physical difference between men and women. So that may lead to a fracturing of this progressive coalition that here in the United States the Democratic Party is depending on. Inside the LGBTQ plus movement right now, for example, the L's are not really happy with the T's because there is a high percentage among the lesbian community of women who are very much feminist in their political outlook, their worldview. And now suddenly you've got men coming along who claim to be women and presenting themselves as victims and wanting to take advantage of the gains that feminists have made in society by putting on the outward appearance of a woman, calling themselves a woman, and, you know, in the same way that male athletes are winning competitions against biological, well, no, I didn't even have to qualify it, winning competitions against women because, again, men are just fundamentally physically different on average from women. But it's the silly things that may finally begin to get the attention of enough people to begin to roll some of this back and say, you know what, there really isn't any biological, scientific justification for this movement. And one of these stories coming out of Holland is a Dutch man, Emil Ratelband, probably mispronouncing it, but who was born on March 11th of 1949. But he feels he's being discriminated against by potential employers and on dating sites online. So he wants to change his legal age by changing his birth certificate to read March 11th of 1969. I mean, get that. A 69-year-old man is filing a legal challenge to be legally declared 49 years old, so he's got a better shot at getting a job and getting dates, so that he'll have more success in the workplace and on Tinder. But, if you're only as young as you feel, well, then why not? Makes sense, doesn't it? Well, no, it doesn't. Biologically, you're still 69 years old. But, here's the thing. I think if it goes that way, why couldn't we just reverse it and go the other way? I mean, I'm 56. Can I self-identify as 65 and then start collecting Medicare and Social Security? No, of course not. And similarly, there's no biological justification for the claims of those who say that they are other than their biological gender. Gender is determined by genetics. And sadly, our society is being turned upside down. And I've said before, and I will say again, because I think this is an important point, we as Christians need to be engaged in this discussion, but we need to be very careful about how we do it. The people who have gender dysphoria are in need of love and counseling. They need treatment. They do not need to be enabled because it's a lifestyle that is destructive. The activists in that community will admit that more than 40% will attempt suicide at some point. And it's not because conservatives are hating on them. It's because when you try to... It's because the belief that you're a different gender than what you are is evidence of deeper issues that need to be addressed. And that's how we need to view this. But again, it may take silly things like this man in Holland who wants to be legally declared 49 so he can have a better shot at getting a date to wake people up. Well, anyway, one final note, just an item in the news that caught my attention, which I thought was, again, kind of silly, which is the warning by climatologists that if we don't do something soon, we're going to be facing the rat apocalypse. The rat apocalypse. Yes, rats, climatologists warn us, breed more quickly in warmer weather. So, rat populations, we're told, are breeding faster and increasing. A population explosion of rats in New York, Philadelphia, and Boston because of climate change. Has nothing to do with, say, an ineffective local government in any one of those cities. I'm sure it's all about climate change. But the question I would ask, just as a test this thesis, shall we say, it's much warmer in, say, Mexico, Guatemala, places along the equator in Africa, and elsewhere around the world. There are places around the world that are much, much warmer than New York, Philly, or Boston. Are they currently overrun by rats? Just asking. I mean, if things really do get warmer as we move further north, would that not make places like Medicine Hat or Fort McMurray more habitable for humans? Just wondering. I mean, I know there are places up north where my mother's family is from, where the main crop they grow is winter wheat. Just because you don't have a very long growing season, so there are certain crops that just don't do as well up there. But as things warm up there, wouldn't those crops that we grow here in, say, the Midwest do better in Manitoba, Saskatchewan? I don't know. Anyway, my point is, they're trying to scare us into letting government dictate how we live our lives. I'm all about preserving the environment. I would certainly love my children, grandchildren, if any, down the road, have access to the same natural beauty that we enjoy here, and maybe even better. But any climate change we see out there, and there's no doubt that climate has changed over the millennia, It's due to the giant flaming ball of gas in the sky. 2019 is going to be an interesting year. We got a lot coming up. We've already told you a bit about the upcoming tour of Israel, the Skywatch TV Wars of the Gods tour in May 12th through 23rd. For information, log on to lipkintours.com. There are conferences already beginning to take up space on the calendars as well. The Hear the Watchman Conference coming back to Dallas, March 28th through the 31st. It will once again be at the Hilton DFW Lakes Conference Center, which is a great place, a great hotel, great place for a convention and a conference. Speakers include L.A. Marzulli, Russ Dizdar, Rabbi Zev Parat, Pastor Carl Gallups, Pastor Paul Begley, Dr. Michael Lake, Pastor Casper McLeod, Coach Dave Daubenmeyer, Michael Boldea, and more. Lisa Haven, Lindley Oz will be there as well. Sharon and I are honored to be a part of it once again, and we hope we can see you there. Again, that's Hear the Watchman, Dallas, March 28th through 31st. Of 2019. For information and registration, log on to hearthewatchmen.com. True Legends has announced their conference coming back to Branson in 2019. That will be September 13th through the 15th at the Mansion Theater in Branson once again. For information, log on to gen6gensix.com. Got another conference to tell you about coming in October of next year, but not tonight. Appreciate you, everyone in the chat room tonight, and whether you're listening live or listening to this in the archives, we appreciate letting us take a couple hours out of your life. Please leave a review for A View from the Bunker on Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever else you find us. We're available wherever fine podcasts are sold. Give us a like at A View from the Bunker, our View from the Bunker page at Facebook, that is. And we remind you that A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House and released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. The opening theme is Iron Bacon by Kevin MacLeod. His website is incompetech.com. Our announcer is D.C. Good. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.